Hello. I mentioned it. Kind of did an introduction to IDEs to kind of cover how you go about rest the next couple of you going to be around building an app. Everyone has their own opinion how an app should be built or your mileage. My opinion based on working in great minds, seeing lots of great presentations, doing a lot of coding. We're going to start off with essentially brand new project. They're going to be using the contact in the chat with just to show you how repository in this outline here as we start building out first two streams, editing, as well as any. But we're going to use Visual Studio. One of the things you'll notice, there is really no file. Create new files from. So to start that, we need a command. If you're using Visual Studio, you can choose File New. Go here and backtick back on those backtick. Here I'm in a home directory project. That's where we're doing everything. And if I see here, I have the latest version. Previous stream, I have Bosch that Git repository. I'm working going to start by navigating to here. I see take one. That's where everything will. Since we are going to have multiple projects, I directory in order to use cuts or keywords to use or command line started. So you can start off with .NET, where it tells you your options. .NET. The word of advice, if you do a lot of things, 1 minus dashes, double dashes, full word. Here, if I do .NET help, it'll give me a list. Eventually, I want to projects. .NET, .NET, because I don't know what the end of it. So here it's telling me .NET new. Essentially, I'm going to want name, output, and then the type template. Lots of different. Some of them I've. So our domain classes. So we are going to class library. Class library. If I get X, find that would do class. So you're noticing probably some. It looks like Intellisense, essentially a plugin I have. Terminal can allow me. It remembers kind of what I've done. Here I'm going domain. I think this is contacts. Folder. I got all the syntax. Should create contact. I go and check cd x there. Now if I list the files, one file contacts.j with a class. Let's open that up. I've already opened up the context because I've been using. Put it. I'm going to go and move this here because I want first. Visual Studio Code in the Explorer window kind of shows these. Once I add another underneath. So we open up our project. This kind of tells Visual Studio Code, or more so the .NET framework, case file. The output of the file is .NET standard. The reason why we're using .NET standard 2.0, audio is muting. Testing 1, 2, 3. Everything looks good. Hopefully not dropping the frame. Okay. Let me know if the audio is cutting out. I'll keep an eye on audio in front of me. I did order a new audio capture card, or so video capture card, so processing for this. Thank you. Apparently there's a got the fan running in the room. Some of the colors fix that. So I ordered a Elgato capture equipment. The idea is run the streaming on a different PC, so I'm not over that. Hopefully that fixes up things like video for dropping. I also played around with some audio weekend, tweaked some of the audio to get rid of some background noise. Still not great quality. Let me know. Clean it up. Okay, so our project says we're going to use .NET SDK and okay, let me try taking out filters. So this filter I was playing with a lot. It kind of does muting. So I'll take out these two and see how it goes. There might be some additional background noise, but hopefully it doesn't mess around with the muting and unmuting. It looks like the audio capture piece is working a lot better. I'm not seeing any drops in the voice except for when I actually do it. I wonder if I do too. I don't think I do. I don't remember. I had a gain, I had suppression. I did have a noise gate, which had an open and closed threshold, which does some of that minimum, and a compressor. I eliminated the noise gate and the compressor. Those are ones I've been playing around with to try and get good sound. Like I said, this one seems to be much better. I'm not seeing any dropped audio, and the audio is pretty much green bars. Okay, so now we have the context here. We're using .NET Standard. The reason why we're picking .NET Standard for this is it allows for cross .NET interoperability, which means I can run this on .NET Framework and run this on .NET Core, which is very common for something you want, like a domain object, which holds all your business entities, because you might share it with an older project that's in .NET Framework plus .NET Core, or even within mobile applications, which we'll see much later on in different streams. So first thing we'll see is it generated a class 1. I don't want class 1 in there. Kind of bummed it always comes with one. So let's go and rename this. So if you go here and hit enter, we are going to create the first one called contact. Now, these domain objects you want to have, they essentially describe what the object is. So I am going to create an object called the contact. And that's what we mean by public class contact. So here, each contact is going to have one or more properties. So first thing we need to do is create an identifier for the contact. So we have public int, and let's call it contact ID. You'll see the identifier vary from item to item, or from workplace to workplace, project to project. There's a couple of conventions that typically happen. The start of the identifier is usually the object name. So in this case, contact, we have a contact. And then by convention, there is normally an an ID afterwards. And depending on what shop you're in and who talks the loudest, sometimes this is all in caps, sometimes it's camel cased or proper case. This is the way I typically do it. So here, what this line tells me is that I have a property that I am making public, which means anyone that has access to this class will have access to this property. And I'm saying this property is using the data type of int. Some places will use an int, some places will use a GUID. It just really depends on the place. I'm going to stick with int to be a little bit easier to use later on. And the get and set says that I am making it where you can retrieve the values of this property, plus you can set the values of this property. So let's go and add a couple of more. You'll notice that once I type P, I get a pop-up window. This pop-up window here is called Intellisense in the Microsoft world. This will give you little helpers or ways to go through your typing. Tries to make things a little bit faster for you. These icons kind of talk to what they're doing. So these are keywords. So it recognizes that partial is a keyword, private, protected, and public are keywords. I'm not going to cover what each of them are, just so you know what we're doing. Prop, full, and prop G are what are called templates or snippets, commonly referred to as snippets. These are pieces of code that can do a lot of typing for you. And then the others are method names or enumerations. So if I click on prop, you'll notice it did a lot of typing for me automatically. And it highlighted the word int. This allows me to go and save a couple of keystrokes, but the biggest piece is having me not have to remember the full entire syntax. So here we're going to create the first one. Type string, it overrode it. Now if I hit tab, it takes me to the next one, which is my property. And let's create a class called first name. I hit tab, it brings me to the end of the line because I don't need anything else. I was thinking, let me make this a little bit bigger from a font size. We don't need the terminal as much, so I'm just going to shrink this down. Hopefully we can see things a little bit better. If I do public, I have to manually type everything. After you do this for a while, you kind of remember some of the basics. So here I created a property that has, or a class that has 3 different properties to it: contact ID, first name, and last name. Now to save you from watching me type, I am going to copy out the remaining couple of classes, or the remaining couple of pieces of text. So now we have a contact first name, contact middle name, contact last name, email address. Contact has a birthday, which here is a system.date.time. They may have an anniversary. This question mark tells it that this property is called nullable, which means they could have an anniversary. They don't necessarily need to do it. And then we have an image URL. This will create a pointer to a image for the person, for the contact. Now that we have a contact, let's go and create an address for the person. So I can do a couple different things. I can come here and create a new class, public class address. And then start typing in all of the great details around the address. But to save you typing or save you watching me type, I am just going to copy and paste. Now you're probably saying to yourself, if you're one of the more experienced developers, that why is he typing everything over and over again? Or why is he putting everything into one file? Typically, you don't put everything in one file. These are all separated out. So I am going to move this out. So if I click on this little balloon where you can do Command period on a Mac and do move type to address. This is called a refactor and move. If you have a tool like ReSharper, they have an ability to do it. If you're in Visual Studio, Writer has this built into it, or a tool like CodeRush can also do this. And you notice once I did that, Visual Studio created an address.cs for me, which has all those properties in it. Now in my address class, I have something called an address type ID, which is an integer. Probably wondering what address type is. Well, address type is going to be a list of different types of applications you want to have in your class. Think of it as the difference between home address, work address, maybe party address, summer vacation house, giving you different options. So something like, something like this. Ignore the red lines for a second. It's only because I don't have it in a class. Depending on how you want to structure your data, you can also do something like this. Not even have this here. And in your contact class where we list address, we can do a public address and call this home address, and then have a public address work address. And what this does, to spell it address and not address, what this does is allows us to, one, save a class. We don't need a class for it. But it also limits us to only the home address and work address without making any modifications. If we create a separate class called address type, we can then do a list of addresses and call this addresses. Oops. Get set. You see it's blue. It's recommending that, well, one, I have it private, so let me do public. It should be recommending that I want to put this as addresses because it's a list. By convention, you usually have the plural for a name if there's going to be more than one of them. A list tells me that I'm going to have one or more addresses that are going to be part of this class. So let's delete the work and the home. List has a red squiggly line. That's because .NET or Visual Studio Code says, I don't know what a list is. What am I doing? If you hover over it, you see some text that says list less than, greater than, could not be found. Are you missing a using or direct or set? or assembly reference. In this case, I'm missing system.generics, but I don't necessarily need to know that. I can do control period to get a list, and I have the ability to either generate it, create it to pass it in, replace it, or give me another option. If I click the little magic light bulb, it tells me that I can either add the using statement at the top of the project to say I'm going to use system.collections.generic for this list, or I can do a fully qualified path and call this system.collections.generic.list. For the most part, most people do usings, especially with something as commonly used as the addresses. So now my addresses are there. So now we have a contact, first name, middle name, last name, email, etc., and addresses. We look at our address. A contact can have a street address, secondary address, so this is address 1, address 2, unit type, city, state, country, and postal code. So I'm going to have to add back in here my address types. So let's do public int, and I can do address type ID, get and set, because I'm ultimately going to add a getter and setter, and this will tell me what the type should be. Let's go and have that class already done. So let me go and do a public class, call it address type, paste in my notes. Oh, gotta get rid of that. It's a bad habit I have. And then this is all messed up, but if I just do that, I should have fixed it for me. Public class, address type. What am I missing? Public class address, public class. So just took Intellisense a minute to catch up. So I can refer to this address ID by the ID itself, or I can give it an instance of the address type and just make it like this. This is the cleaner way of doing it. This way I would have direct access to it. And let's move this out to its own class. So now if I want to access my contact, I'll see it has one or more addresses. An address has one or more types. So I'm looking at it this way. I have contact dot addresses, and then this is one or more, so let's just say the first one, and then I have an address type which would equal something like home or work, something like that. Okay, so most contacts typically have a phone number, so let's go and add in the phones. Public class phone. Why are you acting up so much? Because I don't want this here. And then I am going to copy out the types. And just like the address, we are going to want to create a phone type. Work, sell, home. So let's do a public phone type. Now you notice Intellisense doesn't see the word phone type as I type because it doesn't exist. We are going to create one. It exists in that particular text or that particular set of Intellisense because Visual Studio said, well, you're creating a object with a variable, or you're creating a property with a variable type of phone type. I'm assuming you're going to want to call your property name phone type. So I get a red squiggly line under it. And if I do my little magic guy here, I can generate a phone type in a new file, generate the class, or generate it in a nested class. In order to save us a step, I am going to do generate into a new class. It's going to create a new class for me called phone type with everything there. And the phone type looks very similar to our address type. And like that. So now we have our basic contact, which is red now for some reason. Let's go and see what's wrong with that project. It doesn't recognize phone type. Why doesn't it recognize phone type? It's probably just waiting for me to rebuild. It kind of rebuilds in the background. It's not as fast as Visual Studio is when it comes to background types. Let's fix this formatting because it's not the way I like it. So I'm going to do Command P, or sorry, Command Shift P. Let's get out of that. Command Shift P. Command Shift P. Format. Why are you not giving me the ability to format? I'll do it from the menu. Probably because I don't have anything selected. Or did I uninstall my formatter here? No harm. Just do this and get this on a new line. There you go. Now everything's showing green in here, which means I am ready to compile. So let's go to the terminal window and we'll do it a little new school way of compiling the app. Once terminal opens up, it closed from the previous instance because when I opened up the folder, it pretty much opens up a brand new copy of Visual Studio Code. So let's make sure I'm in the right directory, cd source/contacts. If I do a list, it should match kind of what's in here. So in order to build an app, we do .NET build. Do that depending on how fast your PC is, typically in under a couple of seconds it's built. Obviously the larger the project, the more it takes. This is restoring the latest, and it built successfully, no warnings, in 13 seconds. So now I have a domain object which allows me to work with my contact, pass it around from place to place. Let's go and add a couple of more easy helper features. Your mileage may vary depending on how you like to do things, but for me, I like to put commonly used helper functions inside a domain. Some people might say it's bleeding the business logic into domain objects. In this particular case, or for the couple of things I'm going to do, I don't think it matters as much. Well, let's go and add in the phone. So public list phone, phones, get and set. Yeah, get and set. Man, if I can type, I'd be dangerous today. It's always worse when someone's watching your screen, how your typing goes. So I'm going to add in a little helper class, or more so a helper function that allows me to come up with a full name. So you see here I have first name, middle name, last name. Ultimately, at some point in our project, we're going to want to display a full name. So something like Joseph Guadagno. If there's a middle name like mine, Joseph James Guadagno, or maybe something to the extent of Joseph J Guadagno. So I'm going to build a little helper function to do that. So the way you kind of do it is create what looks like a property. So I'm going to do public string full name. Now, one of the things you're probably saying to yourself is how are we getting and setting this image URL? So this is some compiler magic that was added, I think 2 or 3 versions ago in C#. Essentially, behind the scenes, we create a variable. We, meaning the compiler, creates a variable called _image URL and does all that. So you don't have to do all the basic plumbing work of it. Let's get full name, and we are going to create a getter for it. Now we're only creating a getter and nothing else. We don't want people to set the full name. We just want them to be able to retrieve the full name. So we'll start that off by doing a couple of tests. So for sake of typing, because as we see, my typing has been pretty terrible, I am going to paste in some of the existing code. So here we have a property called full name that has a get. This get is going to look at a few things. So let me minimize this so we have more space. So here it's saying if string is null or empty. So if the first name is empty and that's the double ampersand, and last name is empty and middle name is empty, let's return could not determine the contact name. You could throw an exception here. I opted not to. Now here we're doing slightly different thing. These are two different, we're essentially using the tertiary operator to say if the middle name is null or empty, return this. If the middle name is not empty, return this. Now some of this code is pretty old, so I am going to use some of the newer Intellisense magic, get rid of some unnecessary items in here. Don't want to invert the additional. This one I will get rid of string format and convert it to a more readable string. So here what I did is, now this is a little bit, in my opinion, more readable. This says return the string is null or empty, middle name, return first space last name, otherwise return first space middle name space last name. This is the equivalent of writing code like this. If string dot is null or empty, middle name, return that. else return sorry, I hit the space bar too soon. Return middle name. So this statement here, which really could be one line, I just have it on 3 lines to make it easy, is the same as this group of statements right here. This is highlighted as yellow because we'll never get to this, since this has an if and else and return the same thing or return something, it's not going to get to this code. So let's get rid of that. Now we have a method on here that allows us to go through and pull out the full name. This means anyone that's using our contact could get what we want to be listed as the full name. Couple other items here. We have listed as the address and the phone numbers as list. These really could be something of the IEnumerable standpoint, like iCollection or something like that. That allows the user, the application, to do it. I typically just do a list. However, one of the things, or one of the practices I like to follow, anything that you have as a list, to avoid errors later on, I typically initialize in the constructor. Now, a constructor allows you to execute code whenever you create the instance of the class. So here this says when I do var contact equals new contact, this chunk of code is going to work, or it's going to execute. Typically, I would do something like this, equals new list, and it's smart enough to know that I want an address, and then do the same thing for phones. Now this prevents in the future if I was to do something like contact.addresses without having to do null checks around it. I can do something like using the new Elvis operator, do this to make sure that it doesn't execute. But this way ensures that because the address and phones are lists, that they are always populated. Let's see. So we can go and do that for all the other lists, which I don't think we actually created any of the lists. In the sample app I had a while ago, I did create a list. Nope. That is it for our domain. We are not going to add anything else to it. I made a couple more changes. Let's make sure the project builds. Everything is green here in Visual Studio Code, so it should build. We can actually build it from here if we want. I can do task, run build task, and that will execute it. I can hit the little play button here. Nothing's going to run, but it'll at least build, or just call .NET build here. Now in 13.43 seconds or less, hopefully, we should build our application or build this DLL. Then we will verify that it's ready and good to go. Ooh, 12.71 seconds. It's getting faster. That's because there's some magic that happens behind the scenes. It rebuilds only what's changed and it adds in everything else afterwards. So that's all we have for this. Let's go and commit these changes so we have the first sample set of code. So I'm going to go back up to the root to make sure I add in everything that came in. So let's go to git add dot. That should add everything to my project. If I go here, now it says 6 items in my source code control. I got address, address type, contact, CS proj, phone, everything's good. Let's add a message to it. So I'm going to say git commit minus M for message. You can also just type it right up here if I want. I'm going to be doing both all over the place throughout these different items. Created the initial contacts dot domain. Created the 6 files or 91 inserts. Now you'll see my tag or my prompt is now telling me it's a lighter green, but there is one commit that I have to push up to Git. So I'm going to do git push, and hopefully I don't have to restart my SSH connection. Yes, I do. SSH add. I don't know why I have to restart this every session, but I'm going to make a mental note to do that before. I essentially use SSH to connect to Git, so I don't have to do user ID, password. We have a key value pair that's synchronized between my laptop and Git, so it authenticates who I am. So now that is done, we have our latest version up in here. If we look at Git now and go to contacts, we should see that there is now a source/contacts folder there that was updated a minute ago. If we look at the commits, we'll see there are 6 commits here. This was the latest one. We can actually drill in and look at it to see what happened with it. I added 91 additions, which translates to 6 files, essentially 91-ish lines. And that's all she wrote. Once the video is done uploading, the outline will be updated. It'll have the domain layer here with the commit ID with the video hyperlink. Hope you enjoyed or learned something today. That is all that I have for this session. Tomorrow we'll look at creating a business layer to add, remove, save, delete, that kind of stuff for our domain class called contacts. Any questions from anyone? Oh, that was just my microphone too far into the mix. Cool. Well, please follow me on social media if you already don't. Subscribe to the channel. Video will be posted soon. It'll be on YouTube, which I should actually put a link on here, as well as the bottom of this Twitch channel will have it. It'll go out on Twitter too. Thanks for coming. Have a great day.